कुंज विहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य श्रोत श्री डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गो गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Together we'll recite Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। हरे कृष्णा। We will read this verse from the 10th canto. Today we are starting the Krishna Katha series for Janmashtami. So from 2nd canto we have come for a short while to 10th canto. Return back to 2nd canto. So this is verse from Lord Brahma's prayers. Canto 10, chapter 14, verse 58. You can repeat behind me. समाश्रिताये पदपल्लवप्लवम् महत्पदं पुण्ययशो मुरारेः भवाम्बुधिर्वत्सपदं परं पदं 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 यत् विपदां न तेषाम् समाश्रिताये पदपल्लवप्लवम् महत्पदं पुण्ययशो मुरारेः भवाम्बुधिर्वत्सपदं परं पदं 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 यद्विपदां न तेषाम् समाश्रिताये पदपल्लवप्लवम् महत्पदं पुण्ययशो मुरारेः भवाम्बुधिर्वत्स परं पदं पदं padam padam yad vipadam natesham samashritaya mahat padam punyayasho murarehe pavam budirvatsapadam param padam 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 yad vipadam natesham samashritaya padapallavaplavam mahat padam punyayasho murarehe bhavambudirvatsaparam padam 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 yad vipadam natesham samashritaya padapallavaplavam mahat padam punyayasho murarehe bhavambudirvatsapadam param padam 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 yad vipadam natesham. Mothers? Samashritaya padapallavaplavam mahat padam punyayasho murare bhavambudirvatsapadam padam 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 yad vipadam natesham. Translation and translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: for those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the Mura demon, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoof print. Their goal is Parampadam Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. This translation is actually from Bhagavad Gita, so this translation is by Prabhupada. Purport: according to Srila Sridhar Swami, this verse summarizes the knowledge presented in this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Krishna's lotus feet are described as pallava, flower buds, because they are most tender and of pinkish hue. According to Srila Sanatana Goswami, the word pallava also indicates that Lord Krishna's lotus feet are just like desire trees, which can fulfill all the desires of the Lord's pure devotees. Even exalted devotees like Sri Narada, who are themselves the great shelter for the conditioned soul in this universe, personally take shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. Thus, it is natural that when Lord Krishna manifested himself as the all young boys and calves of Vrindavan, their parents were more attracted to them than previously. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure, and being all attractive, the ultimate object of everyone's love. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, as I mentioned that today we are starting the Krishna Katha series for Shri Krishna Janmashtami. This verse is spoken by Lord Brahma himself in the 14th chapter, and it described that Lord Brahma offered these prayers in the maturity of his realization. Lord Brahma himself tells us that he has read all the Vedas 3 times with complete focus and scholarly attention. Just imagine. Okay? And the Vedas are vast, huge. If like we have Srimad Bhagavatam, we were distributing Srimad Bhagavatam, and one person who didn't know ISKCON Srimad Bhagavatam, he thought it is one book. So he said, okay, you can bring Srimad Bhagavatam to me. And the devotees went with one carton. He said, what is this? I have asked one book. This is one book. Now multiplied by 1 lakh, that is all the Vedas. So Lord Brahma studied the Vedas 3 times. Trir avritya manisheya. Bhagwan Brahma karsneya. Trir avritya manisheya. Adhyavasyat kutastho ratir atman yato bhavet. So 3 times with great focus, with scholarly attention, Brahmaji has studied the Vedas. And of course he has given the conclusion. So these prayers are described to be offered in the maturity of his realization. So I am giving the background of Brahmaji's scholarly achievements. Of course the 4 Vedas emanate from his mouth also. So in the maturity of his realization, Lord Brahma has offered this prayer, and Sridhar Swami says this verse summarizes his prayer. So you can imagine that how important this verse is. So this verse talks of Samashritaye Pad Pallava Plavam, taking shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam often talks of taking shelter of Lord's lotus feet. What does it mean in practical action, in practical sense? Take shelter of Lord's lotus feet. Keep the Lord's lotus feet photograph in front of you and keep looking at it. Offer agarbatti, a lamp. That is good. But in practical action, what does it mean? So the Devatas in the 2nd chapter of the 10th canto, they have offered beautiful prayers called Garbhastuti while Lord Krishna was in the womb of his mother. So they describe what it means to take shelter of Lord Lotus feet in a practical sense. So there is a beautiful prayer offered by the Devatas where they describe Shinvan Grihansam Smarayan Sachintayan Nama Nirupani cha Mangalani te Kriyasu Yattat Charanar Vindayor Avishtachetan Bhavaya Kalpate. So the Devatas describes Shinvan Grihan Samsmarayan Chintayan. One should hear about the Lord. One should accept that sound vibration through the ears within the heart. then one should transmit it for others' benefit. That's the Grinan. And one should remember it. Samsmarayans, Chintayan. What? The name of the Lord, the form, the pastimes, which are all very auspicious, Mangalanite. Kriyasu, and one should practically serve. So therefore, it's hearing, chanting, remembering and serving. That is what is meant by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So Srimad Bhagavatam repeatedly, again and again, talks of take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So one may say, what is the benefit? Like in this time and age, the benefit has to be advertised. What is the benefit of taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord? So Srimad Bhagavatam describes how it will bring a change in our life. What benefit will there be? So I will discuss today the 8 qualities of the Lord's lotus feet. And consider it like a 8-petal lotus. Okay, so the Lord lotus feet, taking shelter of the Lord lotus feet. It has 8 qualities like a 8-petal lotus, and those qualities will also change our life. We'll be able to imbibe those qualities which emanate from the Lord lotus feet. So we'll discuss 8 qualities, although there are many, but the 8 prominent ones. The first quality that we will imbibe in our life is auspiciousness. So the Lord's lotus feet has been described as all auspicious. Again, there is a summary of Srimad Bhagavatam in the 12th canto. Whatever has been presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, Sut Goswami summarizes in the 12th chapter of the 12th canto. And towards that, in the end, he gives a beautiful verse, a summary verse. Avismriti Krishna Padar Vindayo Shinoti Bhadrani Chasham Tanoti Satvasya Shuddhim Paramatma Bhaktim Jnanam Cha Vijnana Viraga Yuktam. This is 12:12:55 verse. So Avasmritihi Krishna Padar Vindayo, constant remembrance of Lord's lotus feet. What does it do? Shinoti Bhadrani. It removes all inauspiciousness. Chasham Tanoti, and bestows highest auspiciousness. What is that? Satvasya Shuddhim, our heart will become pure. Paramatma Bhaktim, the bhakti unto the Lord who resides in everyone's heart will manifest. Along with it, Jnanam and Vijnanam, the knowledge of the Lord and realization of Him. All this will come by remembrance of the Lord's lotus feet. So auspiciousness, and we know how Lord Shiva, the word Shiva itself means all auspicious. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, where does Lord Shiva gets his auspiciousness from? He describes in this bhajan, Ekona Bhojino Prabhu, Je pada lagiya Rama, tapasya korila, Je pada paiya Shiva, Shivatva labhila. Only by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, that Lord Shiva gets his Shivatva, all auspiciousness. In fact, Lord Shiva appears as Nandishwar hill in Vrindavan so that he can get the dust of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna, right, continuously on his head, and along with Lord Krishna, all the other Gopas and Gopis. Not just that, when Lord Shiva went to Vrindavan to see Bal Gopal form, Mother Yashoda first refused, you know the story, but later Lord Krishna started crying, and then Shiva had to be called back, and then Mother Shiva gave the baby Krishna in the lap of Shiva, and Krishna started playing, became very happy. Mother Yashoda said, no toy would make my baby so happy. And mother is very concerned whenever the child cries, how to make the child stop crying. That's a big worry. So Mother Yashoda said, I have got a good solution. Baba, you stay here in Nand Bhavan. whenever my Lala will cry, I will give him in your lap. Then he will stop crying. It will be a big relief for me. So Lord Shiva said on one condition, when you bathe Krishna daily in the morning, that Chanamre should come to me. What will you do with that, bathing water? Second condition, don't ask any questions. So even till today, the Chanamrit, the Krishna Balram are based in Nandagaon temple, and the Chanamrit comes to Nandishwar Mahadev, who is there in the courtyard. So Lord Shiva takes great pleasure in receiving that Chanamrit of Lord daily, and therefore he gets his quality of Shivatva. So therefore, all auspiciousness emanate from the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. That's the first quality. By taking shelter of Lord Lotus feet, our life will also become all auspicious. The second quality of the Lord's lotus feet is that it is a suitable boat to cross over this fierce samsara. This verse itself describes that Samashritaye pad pallava plavam. Plavam means the boat. So one, by taking shelter of the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, this bhav ambudhi means this samsara of material existence, which is like a huge ocean. It's not an ordinary ocean. Dhruva Maharaj had described yen anjaso ulbanam uru ulbanam ye anjaso ulbanam uru vyasanam bhavabdhim. So this ocean is ulbanam, very fierce, uru, very wide, vyasanam, filled with many dangers. There are many sharks, crocodiles, there are high waves. So this is a very fierce ocean, very shoreless ocean. That shoreless ocean becomes like a small puddle by taking shelter of the boat of the Lotus of the Lord. That means one can easily cross over. One doesn't have to be expert long jumper to cross over the small puddle of water. You can see in the rainy season, very small puddle on the road sometimes. One can easily cross over. So in this way, the lotus feet of the Lord, they are a suitable boat. Another verse describes the Lord lotus feet as the boat. This is again prayer by the Devatas, 10:2-31. Swayam samuttirya sudustaram diman bhavannavam bhima madbrasau hrida bhavat padambo ruhanava matrate nidhaya yataha sadanugraho bhavan. O Lord, who resemble the shining sun, you are always ready to fulfill the desire of your devotee, and therefore you are known as desire tree. When acharyas completely take shelter of your lotus feet in order to cross the fierce ocean of nescience, they leave behind on earth the method by which they cross, and because you are merciful to your devotees, you accept this method to help them. So yes, the Lord's lotus feet are like bhavat padamboruha nava matrate. They are a suitable boat, but it is the acharyas who actually makes this boat accessible to us. That is being described over here. So by taking shelter of this boat, we can cross over the samsara. Taking any other shelter in this material world, any material shelters, they are compared to stone boat. And Prabhupada says, one who boards the stone boat is surely doomed. So it's, if you see a stone boat, maybe in some old stone temple and so on, you may see a stone boat. It's good to take a picture, take a selfie with the stone boat. It looks nice, but if you board a stone boat, then you're surely going to drown. So none of the material shelters will actually help. Another example given in Bhagavatam, to take shelter of any other person who is not connected with the Lord of the Lord, is like an attempt to cross the ocean by holding a dog's tail. A dog also is a swimmer. It can swim, but Prabhupada says dog can swim few yards. It cannot swim across the ocean. So therefore, wrong shelter, the wrong person will not help us to cross this ocean of material existence. But the lotus feet of the Lord, made accessible by the devotees, we can easily cross over the ocean of nescience. The third quality of the Lord's lotus feet is that they are very beautiful, just like the lotus is very beautiful to look at. And it's described that how Lord Krishna would walk bare feet in Vrindavan. And Mother Earth considered those marks of Lord's lotus feet to be like a great ornament. This is described in the Gopi Gita also. Verse describes the beauty of the Lord's lotus feet. Pranata kamadam padmajarchitam dharani mandanam dheyamapadi charana pankajam shamtamam chate ramananastanesh urpayadihan. So, Pranata Kamadam, this verse describes how those who take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, all their desires are fulfilled. And Padmajarchitam, they are worshipped by Lord Brahma. Dharani Mandanam, they are great ornament on earth. Therefore, when Lord Krishna disappeared, it was Mother Earth who was under intense separation. Kova saheta viraham purushottamasya. Because everyone else was, at some point of time they would get Krishna's association. But Mother Earth was one who would always had the association of Krishna by the touch of his lotus feet. Whether Krishna is at home, or whether in the forest, whether he's playing with the cowherd boys, or he's with the gopis, he was not there always with everyone, but always in touch with Mother Earth. Therefore, her fortune was the greatest, is described, and her separation was the most intense. So, the Lord's lotus feet are a great ornament, they are very beautiful, and our lives become very beautiful being in touch with them. And today's purport also describes that how Lord Krishna's lotus feet, the word Pallava, Pada Pallava. Pallava means soft bud or just the petal of a lotus. Or you can see a petal of a newly grown rose, how soft that petal is. That's how the lotus feet of the Lord are. So Lord Krishna's lotus feet are described as Pallava, flower buds, because they are most tender and of pinkish hue. So in this way, the Lord's lotus feet are very beautiful, and our life will become beautiful by taking shelter of those lotus feet. The fourth quality of the Lord's lotus feet is that it is a beverage. What kind of beverage? Very sweet, intoxicating beverage. That is described in the 18th chapter of the first canto, where the sages, they were performing a 1,000-year-long sacrifice, and Sudha Goswami comes and begins reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. So this they describes Karmanyasmin anashvase dhum dhumratmanam bhavan appayayati govinda pada padmasavam madhu. So they say that we have started this 1,000-year-long sacrifice, Karmanye asmin anashvase, but we are not assured of what the result will be. But one thing is for sure, that our face and our lungs are getting black. Dhum dhumratmanam bhavan. But you have come suddenly, appayayati govinda. You have recited the topics of Lord Govinda, and we can taste this sweet intoxicating beverage or sweet intoxicating honey. Pada padmasavam madhu. Suddenly we are now tasting this honey. So therefore, usually when you invest somewhere, you get the return on maturity. But here in bhakti investment, the return comes with the start of the investment. At the very beginning, the returns start coming. In fact, Bhagavatam describes that bhakti returns start even before you make the investment. Just imagine, Bhagavatam describes that when you just desire to hear about Krishna, you haven't even heard about Krishna. When you desire to hear about Krishna, Lord Krishna's lotus feet are situated within your heart. So just imagine you express your desire that I want to deposit 10 lakh in a particular scheme. They say, here is your first return. The deposit has not been done also. Imagine there is any investment firm where they will give return even before you make the deposit. That is Lord Krishna's lotus feet. As soon as we desire to hear, the return begins. We can taste the nectar of the Lord's lotus feet. We can get a glimpse of it. So that is described by the sages, that at the very beginning of the bhakti, we can taste this nectar. In fact, this nectar is so sweet that even Krishna wants to taste this nectar. And therefore he makes the attempt. And he puts his own lotus toe in his mouth. Vatapatra Shahi Krishna. Kararabindena padarabindam mukharabindam viniveshayantam. Vatasya patrasya puteshayanam balam mukundam manasasmarami. So, Lord Krishna also wonders what kind of beverage emanates from my lotus feet, and therefore he wants to taste and puts his toe in his own lotus mouth. But guess, he doesn't get the taste, full taste. He gets only little taste. Why does that happen? Because Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, So madhurya ashvadite karena yatan bhakta bhava vinu nahi taha ashvadan. Lord Krishna makes an attempt to taste the nectar, his own nectar, the nectar of his lotus feet. But without the bhakta bhav, one cannot taste this nectar. Therefore, he has to come as Lord Chaitanya to fully taste the nectar of devotional service to his own lotus feet. So that's the fourth quality, that this is a great beverage, sweet, intoxicating nectar. The fifth quality of the Lord's lotus feet, it is that it is a benediction. So the lotus also represents a great benediction. So Dhruva Maharaj describes, Satyashisho hi bhagavam stava pada padmam Ashish tathanu bhajata purushartha murtehe Appevam arya bhagavan paripati dinan Vashreva vatsakam anugraha katarusman. So this is 4:19-17, where he describes, my Lord, Satyashisho hi bhagavams tava pada padmam. Actually, your lotus feet are the highest benediction. And therefore, he said, one should worship your lotus feet in this section only for serving you. Only for serving you. Though now at several places it is described that the lotus feet of the Lord are like the wish fulfilling tree. They can give us any benediction that we want. And Dhruva Maharaj wanted a kingdom greater than his great grandfather. That means greater than Lord Brahma. This whole universe is Brahma's kingdom. And we have no experience beyond this universe. But just imagine the aspiration of Dhruva. He wanted a kingdom greater than this whole universe. So, lotus feet are wish fulfilling tree. And the Lord appeared. He rendered devotional service to his lotus feet. The Lord appeared and he fulfilled his desire and also gave him his devotional service. So therefore Dhruva got the kingdom which he wanted. He got a Dhruva Loka which is greater than, this is beyond the universe, is higher than the whole universe, which is the kingdom of Lord Brahma. So he got the fulfillment of his material desire, and the Lord assured him that you rule and you will come to my abode after 36,000 years. So now, according to one calculation, Dhruva got, unrivaled kingdom. There will be no voting, etc. He will remain the king for 36,000 years. Unrivaled kingdom. And then he is going to go to Lord abodes. So it is like the highest material perfection and the highest spiritual perfection he got. So we may feel, अपन को भी यही package मांगता है, right? We want similar package, Dhruva package. The highest material benediction and the highest spiritual benediction. But it's described that Dhruva, he lamented after he got that package. He was not satisfied because he understood that I have actually postponed my spiritual perfection. Lord came, he could have taken me along with him. He could have reinstated me in his personal service. But then because of material desire, I have to now rule, I have to rot in this world for 36,000 years. So I have postponed my spiritual perfection for such a long time. And therefore he realized it was not good. And Dhruva was contemplating. I offered my prayer to the Lord. Bhaktim mahu prabhatam tvai me prasango. My Lord, I want to constantly hear, chant, glorify, worship your lotus feet in the association of your devotees. But the Lord did not even touch upon that prayer when he was answering, when he was speaking to me. He kept it aside to be fulfilled much later. And then he reminded me, you wanted kingdom? Now enjoy the kingdom. And all your enemies, you felt enmity towards stepbrother, stepmother, right? And the stepbrother will also kill the Lord informed, and so on and so forth. So he said, although we may feel that Dhruva got a win-win situation, highest material benediction, the highest spiritual benediction. But Dhruva, he considered that I have actually lost. I have lost a great opportunity. I have postponed my spiritual perfection. I could have gotten the nectar of the Lord's lotus feet, his personal service. I could have been with him. But now for 36,000 years, I have to be in this material world. I have to rule as a king. So like that. So this is not the real thing he understood. So summarizing this section, Maitreya Rishi, he recites a very beautiful verse to Mahatma Vidur. Maitreya Rishi says, Navai mukundasya padaravindayo rajojushastat bhavadrisha jana vanchanti taddasya arthamatmano yadrichaya labdhamana smaridhaya. So, Navai mukundasya padaravindayo. So, Maitreya Rishi says, those who are actually dedicated to Lord Mukunda's lotus feet, they worship his lotus feet only with the desire to serve him. And that is the most intelligent way of worshipping him. And oh Vidura, you are such a devotee. You always worship the Lord to serve him for his pleasure and not for anything material benediction. So therefore the most intelligent devotees, they should worship the Lord for serving him, for pleasing him, and not for yadrichya labdhamana smaridhya, and be satisfied with whatever is attained on one's own. So by one's work, by one's effort, whatever the Lord gives, that will be attained, but one's focus should be to serve the Lord for his pleasure and not desire anything material. That's the most intelligent way of worshipping him. And in that way one gets the highest benediction, which is, as we discussed, the most sweet, intoxicating nectar of devotional service at his lotus feet. The sixth quality of the Lord's lotus feet is fortune. The lotus also represents fortune. Lord Brahma, in his prayers, he describes, Tadastu me nath sabhuri bhago bhaveyatra vanyatra tuvatirascham yenahame kopi bhavajjananam bhutva nisheve tava pada pallavam. So Lord Brahma says, Tadastu me nath sabhuri bhago. My dear Lord, I therefore pray to be so fortunate that in this life as Lord Brahma or in another life, whatever I take my birth, I may be counted as one of your devotees. I pray that wherever I may be, even among the animal species, I can engage in devotional service to your lotus feet. So Lord Brahma establishes that the highest fortune is to be counted as one of the devotees of the Lord. or devotees of the Lord. And it's mentioned that how the goddess of fortune, she considers the lotus feet of the Lord as her fortune, and therefore she never leaves the service of the Lord's lotus feet. The seventh quality represented by the lotus is fragrance. Now, if you take any lotus, especially if you take from Dadar, you may, even if you put the lotus in your mouth, in your nose, right, insert deep inside, you will not get any fragrance. Yeah. I would read the fragrance of the lotus in Bhagavatam, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and several times I made attempt, to smell some fragrance, but I never got any clue of the fragrance of lotus. So it's difficult, to experience physically the fragrance. At least in Bombay, I'm not sure if somewhere else there are some lotuses which emit great fragrance, but sure, this universe is a vast place. There are fragrant lotuses as described in Bhagavatam, and they have a very sweet fragrance. So the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet is described in the 4th canto. The 4 Kumaras, they experience the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet. Tasyaravinda nayanasya padaravinda kinjalka mishra tulasi makaranda vayuhu antargata savivarena chakaratesham sanshobham aksharajusham apichitta tanvo. So there was a quarrel between the 4 Kumaras and the gatekeepers and the Lord. It is described that the Lord came rushing on his lotus feet. He came quickly because conflict between the devotees should be resolved as soon as possible. So that is not pleasing to the Lord. So the Lord quickly came on his lotus feet, and just by smelling the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet, the 4 Kumaras who were fixed in Brahman realization, Sankshobham, Aksharajusham, they were fixed. Just by the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet, they fell down from their position. So, what is this fall down? This is the fall down of love. Right? They fell in love with the Lord, as they say, they fell in love. So, they fell in love with the Lord. And this fall down is much bigger than being situated as a great Brahmavadi. They were impersonalists. They had not allowed their senses to be agitated by any material object, by any beautiful sight of any beautiful object, by any beautiful fragrance, and so on and so forth. They had never ever experienced the agitation of senses till now, right? They were Pakka Brahmavadis, Akshara Jusham. But this is the first time when the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet entered, they were so strongly agitated, and they could not resist that attraction which they felt for the lotus feet of the Lord. So they are falling down in love with the lotus feet of the Lord, is described in this particular verse. So the Lord's lotus feet are so fragrant that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami described, Krishna pada padma gandha yei jan pai brahma loka adi sukh tare nahi bhai. So when we get a slight experience of the fragrance of the Lord lotus feet, we will not desire any other happiness even up to Brahmaloka. And this fragrance, Prabhupada says, how is this fragrance transmitted in this world? It is described that the lotus feet of the Lord, just like the lotus, has a saffron particles on the filaments. Again, at least this can be seen. This can be seen. If you see the filament, you want to see a lily flower which comes here sometimes from Govardhan Eco Village. You see the filament and there are saffron particles on the filament, and you can touch and you can see the saffron particles. So Prabhupada says when the devotees who have attachment to the Lord's lotus feet, when they speak the glories, when they speak the pastime of the Lord, they transmit this saffron mercy particles or the saffron fragrant particles, and therefore smritir punar vismrita tattva vartmenam. So what is the effect of this fragrance? One's dormant love for Krishna is revived by this fragrance, and that takes place by hearing from the pure devotees. So in this way the lotus feet of the Lord are very fragrant, while this material world is inherently a stinking place. And experiencing the fragrance of the Lord's lotus feet, it will remove all the stink of the material world, which is always burning, just like a burning rubber, burning plastic you can experience if you go out of Mumbai. It produces such a stink. So the material desires burning within the heart produce a great stink in this material world, which is removed by the remembrance and the glorification of the Lord's lotus feet. The seventh quality was the fragrance, and the eighth quality of the Lord's lotus feet is freedom. So taking shelter of the Lord's lotus feet gives us complete freedom. This is also described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yat pada pankaja palasha vilasa bhaktya karmashayam grathitam udgratayanti santah tadvanna rikta matayo yatato piruddha shoto ganastamaranam bhaja vasudevam. So the devotees, yat pada pankaja palasha vilasa bhaktya, the devotees who worship these beautiful petal like lotus feet of the Lord, karmashayam grathitam udgratyanti santa, they can easily obtain freedom from the hard knot of the fruitive activities, karma granthi, which is otherwise is very difficult. Tadvanna rikta matayo, even though the yogis and the jnanis, they try very hard, they cannot actually become free from this karma granthi, which are easily destroyed by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Chaitanya Bhagavat described the same point, that what to speak of, positively hearing, chanting and worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord, simply by remembering the lotus feet of the Lord, just by mere remembrance, for how long? For fraction of a moment, not even 1 second, for a fraction of a second. If one just remembers the lotus feet of the Lord for a fraction of a second, that person will never see Yamaraj. That is described in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Tilardhe ko ye charan dhyana kaile matra yamatara nahena adhikar patra. So Yamaraj cannot touch that person who simply remembers the lotus feet of the Lord even for fraction of a second. Thus, remembrance of the Lord's lotus feet, devotion at His lotus feet, gives us immunity from this samsara, from this material existence for eternity. Just imagine one shot of vaccine gives you immunity for eternity. Now, the ordinary vaccines you have to take second dose, booster dose, and so on and so forth. Right? Repeated dose one has to take. But herein, just remembering the lotus feet of the Lord once in devotional service for even a short while gives us immunity from this material existence, from this samsara for all eternity. We can't imagine the benefit of worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord. And all these scriptural statements, they are not atishayokti. Some people consider, to encourage people, atishayokti means exaggeration. It may be exaggeration. No. The Acharya described the glories of the Lord lotus feet cannot be sufficiently described. They are not overstatement. In fact, they are understatement. One should consider them to be understatement and not overstatement. So there is a beautiful pastime of Prabhupada. When the Juhu temple was being constructed, the boundary wall was made, And Dr. Patel, who would go with Prabhupada on a morning walk, and he had a friendly relation with Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, this boundary wall looks like the boundary wall of a prison house. You have imprisoned all the devotees inside. Prabhupada said, no, jail is outside. Inside is freedom. Right? So actually, the true freedom lies in surrendering at the lotus feet of the Lord. And Prabhupada continued to describe, he said, actually the disease of the conditioned soul is one, that is independence, independent nature. And sincerity means, Prabhupada explained, sincerity means voluntary surrender. Otherwise, one can do one's own thing. One can do one's own thing. So, but sincerity means voluntary surrender, and surrender to the will of the spiritual master. Surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service. And that gives true freedom. Till we want to be independent, we will actually remain bound up. We will actually suffer. But true freedom lies in surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord through the via media of His true representatives. So we can discuss the 8 qualities of the Lord's lotus feet today. They are source of all auspiciousness. They are a suitable boat to cross over this fierce Bhavasagar. They are a beverage, a sweet, intoxicating nectar. Lord Lotus feet are most beautiful, and our life will become beautiful by taking shelter of them. Lord Lotus feet are the highest benediction. Service to their lotus feet, service to these lotus feet is the supreme benediction. It is the highest fortune. To be known as a devotee is the highest fortunate position. Then the fragrance, our life will become fragrant by taking shelter of this fragrance, lotus feet of the Lord, and we will experience complete freedom. So these 8 qualities, that is like 8 petals of the lotus, and number 8 is dear to Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani. They both appeared on the day of Ashtami, Janmashtami, Radha Ashtami. So therefore, although there are many qualities of Lord Lotus feet, I selected these 8 for today's discussion as like a 8-petal lotus to be offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. And if you can see, there is a lotus in the hand of Vishakha Devi, which has 8 petals. At least I purposefully counted 8. So the 8 main petals. So these 8 qualities are like the 8-petal lotus. And this lotus can be described in one word, which is fabulous. It's a fabulous lotus. And FAB, the word fabulous can be just acronym to the word FAB. And F stands for the fragrance, freedom, and the fortune. A is auspicious, and the B is beautiful. It's a boat, it's a great beverage, and benediction, the highest benediction. Thus we will experience, in taking shelter of the Lord's lotus field, we will experience fragrance, complete freedom, great fortune. Our life will become supremely auspicious. Our life will become beautiful. We will be boarding a suitable boat, and on that boat the sweet nectarine beverage will be served, and that is the highest benediction of life. And therefore, I conclude with a beautiful instruction of Lord Chaitanya given to his students. He said, Yavat ache prana deh ache shakti tavat karaha Krishna pada padme bhakti. As long as there is life and strength in your body, you should render devotional service to the lotus feet of Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. we have 2-3 minutes still. If there is any comment, any question, any clarification. Okay, so all questions are answered at the lotus feet of the Lord. Jai Shri Radha Gopinath ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nithai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna.